Good afternoon and welcome to our session incorporating real scenarios in a statistics discussion board. Our presenter today is Michael Heeren, faculty member at Purdue University Global. If you have any questions for the presenter during the session, please feel free to enter those into the Q&A section at the bottom of your Zoom room screen, and we will address them at the end of the talk. On that note, I will hand it over to our presenter.
Thank you for the introduction, Victoria. I'll go ahead and share my screen. And so the reason that I'm giving this particular presentation is that a lot of people like to talk about the importance of having the real life scenarios. However, there aren't always the exact examples of doing that. So what I'd like to do is just present a couple of examples that I have in a statistics discussion board. And then at the end, I'd hope that others may be willing to share some of the things that they've done so that we can all learn from each other. Okay, so just a couple little outcomes here. We're going to see examples of real life scenarios and thinking about tweaking some real life data that you have. And the first part is tweaking some real life data that you can use in your classroom. Now, the first part is, I agree that you should use real life data as much as you can when you are working with statistics. However, sometimes you want to have that data readily available for your students without them having to do a lot of work to get that particular data. So for example, here, I like to use like the World Values Survey that's in a couple of courses that I teach. However, due to the restrictions presented on the website, I can't download that and put that in a location where students can access it. So they'd have to go out and access it themselves. And most of the time, our students, even when they graduate, aren't going to be going out and retrieving that themselves. They'll be getting it from their businesses that they're working from, or some of their partners, that those partner businesses, they'll send them the data, they analyze it, things like that. So instead of using that, what you can do is create what I want to call the tweaked data. The first thing that I would do is just download the actual data itself from that website. So I have, some good data to work with. And then I actually sort the data itself into different categories. And because I'm doing that, I can create the probabilities for some of the different types of data to actually occur. And once I've done that, I can just go into Excel and use a random number, excuse me, but generator just to create some random data that is based upon that real life data. So it's not exactly that data, but it's similar to the real life data. And so that way I am not violating that need to have the individuals download that data in order to use it for a discussion board. That's why I would like to do some tweaking. That's just an example of what you can do. The first example that I want to present is from MM 305. That's a business statistics course that we have. Just to be clear, this is not a calculus-based statistics course. This is a statistics course which helps students to learn and utilize different statistical methods, but then use tools such as Excel to help them do calculations with those particular pieces of data and so forth. So this is a scenario where you're going to they're going to go to a country with their new business. So they're already pretending, that they have a business. They're going to think about some cultural differences between where they are, where their business is, and also with the place that they want to go to. And in this way, that we're examining and thinking about, some of our DEI areas that have been coming to the forefront of the educational world. So we are incorporating that idea, and it's a very simple idea. First, you want to just choose where you are starting from, and then choose where you're going to. Some choose to start in the United States. Some of them choose to start in other locations. And here are some areas that are located in the world they get to choose from. So there's like, I don't know, about 50, 55 or so different countries in here that they can go ahead and choose from. And this list did come from that World Values Survey, so that I got the data and I sorted it by country. And then I sorted the different categories to find percentages of the different values inside of each of these countries. What I chose for the students to think about in their particular discussion is, the importance of family, the importance of friends, importance of leisure rating, importance of politics, importance of work rating, uh, importance of religion, and if men have more right to a job than a woman does. And all of them except for the last one have the same categories of very important, somewhat important, not very important, not at all important. And so I generated my data based off of what the World Values Survey had. It was fake, but it had the same sort of percentages. And what's really kind of cool is that they get to choose, which of these is important to them and their particular type of business. And I also in the bottom have different ethnic backgrounds. And I found it interesting that there were 173 different ethnic backgrounds when I got that data from the World Value Survey location. So with some specific information, we're going to be given a pivot table. So I actually created the pivot table for them to use based off that data. You're going to find the frequencies using the pivot table. And when you do that, you're going to be thinking about writing up a very nice hypothesis. So this is going through and saying, how do I think that these two particular countries are going to compare, with this particular data, whether you're talking about just the family ratings, the friends ratings, which one seems to be higher or lower? Do they seem to be about the same? What do you think? And that can make a nice determining factor when you are planning to go someplace. It could make the difference between a business succeeding or failing. The students are asked to write those hypotheses, whether they want this greater than, less than, not equal to, and obviously they're using the null and the alternate hypothesis. We want them to think about if they're looking at a one-tailed test or a two-tailed test. We want to actually say that. And, just a brief description how the outcome may impact your business success in the new country. So here's just a nice little student example write-up that they have. This student has a bookstore that started in New Zealand, and they're considering opening up one in Sweden. They're looking at family and leisure time intersections because the business relies heavily on family-oriented atmosphere. And they want to be able to unwind, visit with friends, enjoy a good book. They want to compare the percentages of people that are an intersection of family, somewhat important, family, very important, and leisure, somewhat important, and leisure, very important. You'll see how that plays a role here in just a minute on that particular pivot table that I made. They're actually showing then the real values, how they got their particular totals for those percentages in New Zealand and also in Sweden. And then does have a nice little prediction that New Zealand will have a higher percentage of people in those intersections. So the next part I want to have you see, I'm not sure if you can see it very well, move that in case that'll make it better, is that on the right, that's the actual pivot table result. They can go through with that pivot table. They can choose New Zealand and they can choose Sweden as their countries. And then based upon those choices, they have across across the top, they have some values from one of those distinguishing characteristics, and on the columns, the other distinguishing characteristic, and then they're just getting their values from those intersections. Now, something that on this particular one that I would have noted to the student is that the particular hypothesis doesn't really match very well with what they were thinking, and that's okay. I know that people like to share the perfect responses, but it's okay to talk about those responses that may not be perfect. Here they have that 61%, and that 61% actually did not come from where they thought. The 61% came from New Zealand, 54% came from Sweden, but they're trying to see that New Zealand is higher, which means that they would want to see if that 54% is actually going to be less than that. And that's the discussion that we have, which is actually a good thought process, not only for me and that student, but then for other students to see what's going on. And what's kind of cool is that as the discussion progresses, I see that students have noticed what I have done and they've applied it more correctly as the discussion has gone on, which lets me know that they are reading that. Oh, okay. And then that little interpretation, they're talking about, the amount of success they're going to have based upon this particular result and how they compare. Then from there, we like to give some guided responses. And I know that can be limiting at times on a discussion board. However, in math, it's kind of hard sometimes for students to do that advanced discussion beyond that initial post. So we like to give them some guidance on what we want them to talk about that really does advance to the discussion. So, here they're having them talk about type 1 and type 2 errors would occur and how that would impact the business. And so here's an example of a response. If there's a type 1 error and you were to believe that that probability is greater than 0.843, and you were to reject the null, then you might make the wrong decision of staying in Australia. However, if the null is true, then you have made a good decision. If type 2 error, they have that you stay, made a good decision. However, you move to Mexico, you may the potential of losing your business, based off the numbers that you provided if the null is false. So they're going through and they're thinking through what that type 1 and type 2 means. Now, if they get it right or wrong, you want to have it right, but you also want to see how they are thinking about it to make sure you can guide them pretty well with that particular type of understanding. And for a second reply, they're actually going to be analyzing their hypothesis test. we're asking them to choose the level of significance. And we're asking them to whether they should reject or fail to reject based off of that particular set of data, and then just interpret what that means. So I'm not sure how to get to not be there. There we go. Okay. So what we've done in this particular course is actually provided them a spreadsheet to reduce the computations, because once again, this is a business statistics course. And typically, if you have that data in there, those students are going to be using some sort of software to at least help them analyze and maybe even say what to do, what not to do. And in this particular case, we have a testing method, and it just lists those various different scenarios for the hypothesis test, whether you are, not equal to, less than, or greater than for the alternate hypothesis, and what should you do. But then you want to say, should we reject it, not reject it? So that's the first scenario. The second scenario it is based off of working with control charts in the business stats class. So we're just asking them to go out and actually get real data this time, but we wanted to make sure that the real data that we gathered is something that's doable and not super time consuming. And so we thought, real estate is everywhere. And so we want them to go and look for particular houses. And sometimes they are look for rent. Sometimes they're looking at actual prices. We wanted to actually do actual prices, but even if they are doing their rents, just to compare their rents to see if they're similar or something seems different with one city or another is important to see. We provided them a location to go. In this case, we asked them to go to Zillow. And one time 10 cities in the state. And that worked for, I think, all the states. That typically you have at least 10 cities which you have the houses available for sale, or at least relatively close, that you can get that small amount of 4 from each of the cities to get that little sample. From there, we're just going to analyze the data. Analyze, are those averages, similar? Are they within control, meaning that the housing prices or those rents are similar to each other, or are they not? And if the ranges are actually in control, meaning, are some cities spread out way more than the others? And if they are, a follow-up that I like to ask them about is, what's causing that? Okay. So from there, here's just a nice little student example. This student found 4 different houses listing. They happened to be in Oregon, and they mentioned what they were looking for: 2-bedroom and 2 bathrooms. And the ranges of values are given, and the means are given as well. Their nice little result. The charts, we can see the range is a bit out of control by number 10 located in a particular location. Also throw the mean out of control by that same one. And so once again, I have a spreadsheet out there to help them analyze the data because of the type of the course. They're just able to go ahead and put in the data. That's what you're seeing in the top left. It's actually the central left location. They enter in that raw data from those housing prices. And then down below that, there's a spreadsheet just, analyzing what's going on. Are we in control, out of control? And this is based off of not knowing the population standard deviation and the population mean. And so we have a table that's being utilized to help look that up for 3 standard deviations. The students are also given instructions on how to create the control charts to see, visually if things are in control, which should match the output in those tables, which actually indicate if they are above or below the tolerance levels, and it's blank if it's within tolerance. And then from there, uh, we're going to have them do some work in thought with some z-scores. And because the z-scores, many students seem to not think about, exactly what they mean. So we're going to be giving them the opportunity to examine those. For example, find the z-scores of the highest and the lowest average prices, and just make a nice little comparison in there to say, okay, what's the percentage chance of being above the highest, percentage, below the lowest, to see, you know, what's going on. And 50% of them actually get that idea backwards at first, because they don't think about being closer to the zero means that you have that higher chance of occurring. And this is a nice little example here of a student's response. They found the standard deviation based off of the data provided. They found the z-scores, and then they made the observation that's more likely to be lower in this particular instance. And then the last one is actually calculating the probability itself, not necessarily the z-score. And the hope is that students will see that the z-score response and the percentage response in the thread with that same initial data should have that same result. This is just an example from a student. They chose Cynthia's information, and they provided a nice little showing with the Excel spreadsheet what they actually did to get their particular values and make their observations. I didn't require that they show a spreadsheet. They just happened to do that. Okay. So that's it for my two particular examples that I wanted to share. I know it's a little bit less than the exact 35 minutes, but I was hoping to have ideas shared by others in the Q&A location. And so the first question that I see is for the nursing students. I have them do semester-long project with parts as discussions. They do a systematic sample and other parts to help them analyze up through a hypothesis test. That's awesome. That's great. And I actually think I might know uh, Ms. Eister, I'm sure. Oh, post the website for the data. Sure. I can go back and I can grab that. I'm just going to go ahead and stop sharing uh, my screen, and I'll go into the presentation itself and do that. Mhm. Go, and I'll go ahead and put that in the Q and A. Or actually, I think I can actually put it in the chat. Okay, so there's that. Um, okay. So then I have a question uh about, we'd love to hear about how students have liked utilizing these types of data. What has been the feedback from students? Students have really loved, going through and actually working with something that is very applicable. A lot of our students are in business. They have to think about how, expansion, you know, does actually impact their business. And this gives them a way to analyze it numerically so they can justify it, either to themselves or to their bosses to make sure that this is a viable thing to do, or maybe we shouldn't go there. So students have really liked that. Yes. Yep. They students uh things that this does apply. In fact, I had a student just this past term that ended actually say that they were taking ideas from that particular class and implementing them into their own business as we were going throughout the semester. These aren't all of the discussions that we had. I just wanted to share just a couple of them that I thought that were worth sharing and might inspire others as well to do some different things that might be out of the box. As I saw in a presentation yesterday, it spices up the discussion board and makes it more meaningful. Are there any additional suggestions or questions that someone may have for spicing things up, in a statistics class or in a different class? Gotcha. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Nursing, it can be quite helpful. And I think it's even more helpful when you have a course like this statistics course that is geared more towards a particular type of discipline. For example, I know that there's a statistics class uh, that is geared towards, I think, the nursing students in their master's program, at Purdue Global. I actually haven't asked them which one their favorite was. I haven't thought to actually uh, do that. Um, but based upon the level of engagement, I would think between those two particular ones, I actually think they like the first one better. Not that they disliked the one in which they're looking at the housing prices and samples and things like that, but I think that they like the other one better because they were thinking about, either their own particular business or a future business they want to start up. Okay. And let's see, I think I posted that link for that website for that data that I got that from. Um, the data set that I actually created, I'm actually happy to share. I don't have it in a location that's shareable right now, but I can certainly make that available.
And we do have some comments in the Q&A box, since that's the only way attendees can communicate. So I want to make sure you saw those.
Okay. Oh, gotcha. Okay. Yes, real life is huge to make that difference. And also to bring our students forefront, diversity, equity, and inclusion piece, I think is also important, because if we make people aware of it, they become more aware of it, but then also they become less aware of it because you don't need to include as much as it permeates society. Oh, yes, I can make sure that the PowerPoint slide is available for you to look at and think through. Okay.
Thank you.
So I think that pretty much wraps up. I want to thank everyone for coming and attending, and I'll turn it back over to Victoria.
Thank you so much, Michael. This was wonderful. And so appreciate you being willing to share your resources and information. And everyone, we are recording our presentations. We'll have those, and then our presenters who are willing to share their slides, we'll make sure that those are shared with you all as well. But thank you again, Michael, for your time and your presentation today. And everyone, we will go ahead and wrap up a little early for this session. And our next session will be our lunch keynote speaker, Dr. Jackie Leone. And you can view the chat for the session meeting room link or access our conference website for a complete list of our concurrent sessions and their descriptions. And of course, while accessing the conference website, don't forget to swing by the virtual exhibit hall to say hello to my colleagues on the Hawks team. And while you're there, you can view a quick 5-minute demonstration, request your Hawks t-shirt, and be entered to win a $50 Amazon giveaway. And also, in the spirit of St. Patrick's Day, you'll find a few golden coins around the conference website, so make sure you click on those to be entered to win an additional raffle. And we'll see you at the next session. Thank you, everyone.